All right, I will keep an eye on the waiting room, but we can get started. You are all in the right place for the Prosecutors of EMDT team members webinar today. Welcome, welcome. Next slide, please. So you have seen this before, this disclaimer. You will definitely see it again. I'm sure you all have it like burned into your brain. So I'm not going to read it all for you, but this just says that our opinions, findings, and conclusions do not necessarily reflect those of the DOJ.
And just so you know, we do have some new folks who are attending a webinar for the first time.
Well, welcome everyone. I just assume you all were friendly faces. All right, as we get started, I'm going to run through some housekeeping and then turn it over to our two wonderful presenters, Lisamarie and Paige. We'll do their lovely introductions and get us started. But in terms of housekeeping, we're going to stay muted unless you're speaking. We do have a great sized group today, which is awesome. Feel free to use the chat feature. But if you do want to, comment or ask a question, feel free to hop in. Lisamarie and Paige really love facilitating robust discussions and allowing you all as participants to really get engaged with the content. So feel free to do that. You are in very good hands if you want to participate. In terms of renaming your Zoom square, I think everyone actually looks great with their first and last name indicated. I'm seeing no iPhones or iPads, which is awesome. If you do have a question about that, you just hover over your box, 3 dots will show up, click that, and it will say rename. If you want to raise your hand, if you have a question or comment, that will be at the bottom of your screen. You'll see it says raise hand. Feel free to throw a hand up if you do have a question or comment, but of course there will be time to answer any and all at the end of the session. We won't be doing breakout rooms today, but we will have a brief poll. So you'll see that come up on your screen. And of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. My name is Anna. The best way to reach me is actually through the chat. I'll be with you all in the session today. So if you have any tech questions, feel free to reach out. So I'm going to hand it over to our presenters.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. We're really grateful to have you. I'm Paige Ulrey. I'm a prosecutor doing elder abuse work in King County, which is Seattle, Washington. And Lisamarie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lisamarie Bristol. I'm actually the Gwinnett County Solicitor-General elect. I take office on January 1st, but most recently I was a senior assistant district attorney in DeKalb County and also in Gwinnett County. It's great to be here.
So do we want to start, Lisamarie, with our objectives, and then we can go into talking to everybody who's here and get a sense of who's here?
Absolutely. So we hope, as Anna already pointed out, Paige and I are really hopeful that this will be a very interactive opportunity for us to share and talk about things and what's working and what's not working. But our hope is that after this webinar, you all will better be able to identify the unique role that prosecutors can play in forging connections with law enforcement and other allied partners like community-based advocates, APS, ombudsmen, things like that on an EMDT. Because we think once we know those connections, those relationships, they really can go a long way. We're also hoping that we can determine the ways that participation on an EMDT can benefit prosecutors' ability to work with older victims and making more informed decisions on their elder abuse cases. And finally, because we are ambitious, we hope to help you all strategize about how to solve common issues experienced by EMDT members regarding the role of prosecutors on the team. Anything you want to add to that, Paige?
I don't think so.
Great.
So we thought we'd start with a poll. So if you guys can answer the question of what agency you represent in your MDT, just so we get a sense of the different disciplines who are here today. And the poll appears on your screen.
Okay, so mostly law enforcement and APS.
Okay.
So by law enforcement, I guess we're assuming prosecutors.
Oh, right. There's no question for prosecutors. That's a good point.
Right.
Okay. So can one of the I guess if anyone is a prosecutor is present, could you raise your hand? And Anna, can you help us with that? I can't see everybody.
Yes, no problem. You can additionally message in the chat that you are a prosecutor. I see
Serena.
one hand.
Right on.
And then-
Krista is the EMDT coordinator. Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
So we thought we'd just start out by hearing from you guys, because we don't have our own agenda except to be as responsive as possible to what your issues are, if there are issues that you're dealing with on your MDT. So could someone just talk to us about what's going on with your MDT and what is working well and what may need some improvement?
And this is a safe space. We're really just trying to get to the heart of some issues. Let's see if we can, brainstorm. Sometimes looking at things from a different perspective or having a fresh set of eyes really helps you kind of, recenter and figure out a new approach.
Can you hear me okay?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think we have a very successful MDT. I think we get a lot of participation. I think that we get a lot of volunteering for a successful attempt with the clients that we bring. What frustrates me on occasion is we had a case that we were going to present this week and we couldn't present it because the DA said that they were prosecuting, the case is going through the prosecution process. So we were not allowed to discuss, which kind of leaves the client hanging as far as resources go. So, and that's happened a couple of times where we're not allowed to bring somebody to the MDT because of the prosecution.
Okay,
And-
so I have a follow-up question to that. So this was a victim in the case that you were hoping to brainstorm or bring to the MDT for what, like to get resources, to what was the hope?
Yeah, for resources.
Okay.
So I feel like our MDT, and being in these meetings throughout the year, I was talking to Linda about this. I feel like we're kind of unique the way that we run our MDT, in that it sounds like a lot of the MDTs across the country are getting the cases like fresh, where our cases are coming to us like after there's an agency, myself or a police officer or a fireman or somebody's been involved with that person. So they've maybe tried some things, or there's just so many layers that they're bringing it to the MDT to kind of say, okay, this is what's been going on. This is we've tried. What else is out there?
When things are kind of stuck, Lynn, is that what you mean? Yeah, that was how ours started out as well. And we've moved away from that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So that is one issue, right? So if you got the case earlier on, it'd be easier, first of all, to act quicker for your victim's sake, but also.
I don't think it would, because we wouldn't be able to do much, because the prosecution would say, wait a minute, we might prosecute this case and then we can't do anything. So that's kind of the
so even if
hurdle that
the
we
case is
have.
not being actively prosecuted, if there's a possibility of prosecution, they say you can't.
Well, I'm saying if it was fresher than what it was, right?
Yeah.
By the time we get it, we know that it's not being prosecuted.
Yeah.
Or
Mhm.
we don't know, like in this particular situation, we didn't know there was another case going on.
Right.
So
Is there a reason the prosecutor couldn't just step out of the meetings?
I've
Right.
asked that. It didn't go well. So they were concerned about the information being out there, which we're a confidential group, right? Like we're not supposed to do confidentiality agreements. So we're trying to figure out a way to kind of maneuver that, or how to, go about that situation and bring it up again, because the last conversation we had didn't go so well.
Mhm.
So
Do you all have an MOU in terms of, like, and I say that in that you hit on one thing I wanted to mention. It is a confidential group. And if the purpose of the MDT is to, like, it just seems, I definitely understand from the prosecutor's perspective why they don't want to talk about a case once it's pending. Absolutely. However, the notion to not extend services seems a little odd. So I'm wondering if maybe the MOU could be revisited. So it could be like, here's the line, here's what we can discuss, here are the resources that we can offer in the interim. Maybe those terms could be better hashed out, so that there's just clear boundaries in terms of what the MDT can continue to do and offer in terms of resources without interfering with the pending prosecution? I don't know.
Yeah, Lynn, I think that's a unique thing to your community,
Okay.
and not always the way that it's recommended that it be done.
Okay.
I've definitely heard this raised by other MDTs or by other coordinators about it being a problem. I guess I don't understand why. I mean, for me, if we had a case that was being prosecuted or could be prosecuted, I want to, if the prosecutor's worried about negative information coming out about their case or something, I would kind of want to know that anyway to deal with that directly versus
I feel like it has more.
later. Is that what it is?
I feel like it has more to do with the information getting out and ex parte and having to provide information to the public defender or the defense attorney is where I feel like the prosecutor feels the lines get crossed.
So let me ask you this, who participates in your MDT? Like who all has a seat at the table?
Oh, we have a wonderful MDT. We have the prosecutor, the DA's office. We have the city attorney's office. We have a team of coordinators out of our police departments in each district that go on cases. They're at the table. There's our mental health team is at the table. We have our aging and disability,
Right.
Dr. Cog is at the table. Trying to think of the name for the realtors license. Sorry, I'm blanking.
That's enough. We know. You
Yeah, it's a great variety of both community agencies and systems agencies. But whenever there's a possibility of a case being prosecuted or in the process of being prosecuted, we have to stop with that particular case.
So I guess I would love to know, and maybe you don't know the answers to these questions, Lynn, but maybe we could have a future conversation where we kind of play it out and talk about, okay, so what happens if there's something exculpatory that comes out that has to be revealed to the defense? Is that necessarily a bad thing? Is that what they're worried about?
I believe that that's what they're worried about. Yes.
Like if you have a victim who's recanting or something like that, and that, that might come out and the defense might hear about that. I guess I feel
You're
like
thinking about Brady, aren't you?
Mhm.
Yeah. So these cases
Yeah.
are so complicated, and our goals as prosecutors are kind of different in these cases than they are in other more typical criminal cases. And if
Right.
there is something going on where the victim maybe is there's something under Brady that we'd have to disclose to defense, that may not be a bad thing when our ultimate goal is really making sure that these prosecutions are consistent with what the victim wants and what makes sense for them. And convictions aren't always the answer. And so the MDT is a great forum to come together and talk about, okay, if the victim is reluctant, let's say if that's the issue, what can we do to sort of help her feel stronger and feel more confident? Or is there something besides prosecution that we could do, that would help with the situation? So it's just, I kind of like the idea of stepping back and getting away from how we're trained, which is we want to get convictions, to really thinking about what's best for this person here. And I think you really need that MDT perspective to make that kind of decision in a thoughtful way.
It can be difficult because, much like what Paige is saying, prosecution has traditionally taken the course of get the case, try the case, get the conviction, move on. But these cases are very different. And sometimes when you're in a jurisdiction that's not quite used to it, it does come across as a little odd when you're saying, hey, prosecution should be our last resort. You might get some pushback, but I would suggest perhaps, that's why I was saying look at the MOUs for your particular MDT. It might be great to maybe revisit the core values of the MDT and determine if that is in fact in line with what you all are trying to do. Like, are we trying to resolve these cases with the least amount of, re-traumatization to our victims as possible? Meaning, are we trying to do something in a way so we don't have to drag them to court, don't have to drag their family business through the court system, and maybe using some community partnerships will get the job done as well. But that's a tough one because it's a very institutional, it's ingrained in us very much so as prosecutors, and it takes a bit to kind of shift that thinking. But that's definitely, I think, a good conversation probably to start. Like, what is the core value of this MDT? What are we trying to accomplish? What are our goals? What do we hope to benefit the community with this group coming together?
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure. And I think it can be kind of a knee-jerk reaction. Like, this is just because we're not used to this, having these MDTs and talking about our cases beyond our office. But in just thinking about what the goals are, as Lisamarie was saying about the MDT and of elder abuse in general, I think it is worth having that conversation. And if we can help in any way by like sort of, meeting with them, if that would be something they'd be interested in, sort of talking through what their concerns are, we'd be happy to do that.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I think we have a good starting point. Maybe we'll grow from there. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Jillian, did you have a question?
Yeah.
I don't know if she heard you, Lisa.
Oh, I was, Jillian, you'd unmuted and remuted.
No, that was me. I was having just trouble with my computer. Yeah.
And where are you from?
I'm an ADA in Philadelphia.
Oh, excellent. Okay,
Yes.
good. Mm-hmm. Hey, the other prosecutors, what's working well for your team and what's going on?
And if anyone has similar issues with prosecutors, with what Lynn was talking about, we'd love to hear about that too, because it may be that we're not thinking about this the way other people are. Jillian, can we call on you?
Yes, except I think I missed part of what Lynn had said because I had a phone call. So I think,
okay.
But if somebody wants to recap, then I'm happy giving.
Sure. What she was talking about is that their prosecutor basically says that any case that is being prosecuted or could be prosecuted, they're not allowed to staff in the MDT. And that's not what my MDT does, but I just wondered if other people's does that or what your thoughts are on that. I think they're worried about sculpturing.
Or just skip it and share.
Yeah, and if you don't want to talk about that and want to talk about something else, that's fine too.
I don't think we have that issue. I mean, my colleagues are on here too, but I don't think we take that position or have that issue. We seem to have a good, right now, our MDT team, we've been meeting, we've had very, I think, engaging meetings. I think we're trying to figure out, I think we have challenging issues on some of our cases with where the MDT is helpful, where there are collateral issues involved. So there's definitely a crime, but then there are also collateral issues like housing and a lot of financial issues that are collateral. So credit. And so we're trying to use the MDT effectively to help people in that way. And we do have cases where a crime is being committed, but it's among family members. I mean, that's a classic issue with prosecution in general, but in domestic violence cases where it's people who are related to one another, or the person might even be willing to prosecute it, but then there'll be a collateral consequence regarding housing. And so that keeps them from wanting to testify against a perpetrator.
Right. The impact is really felt directly by them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what other agencies do you have that participate in your MDT, and how do you think you guys handle those hurdles?
We have, in ours, we have the Senior Law Center, which represents seniors on a number of different matters, and they've been helpful for us with protection from abuse orders.
Yeah. So they specifically do civil.
Right.
Whereas and then we'll handle all the criminal.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
And then Serena, please correct me if I'm wrong. We have PCA.
No, you're doing great.
We have PCA. So that's the welfare agency for Philadelphia to investigate cases of abuse against seniors. And then we have Penn Memory Center. So associated with University of Pennsylvania and maybe Pennsylvania Hospital, but I think UPenn. And then Carrie, which is another, Serena, I don't know how you would characterize Carrie. It's a social services organization for seniors, but
Yeah, so they're identified as an advocacy group. They've been around for quite a few decades. So they do the ombudsman for long-term care. They do court accompaniment. They do like mediation between families who are trying to figure out what the next step is with their loved one. They provide counseling for seniors. They do a lot. They just sort of, I think, have over the years identified where the gaps are in the system and have bravely tried to fill them. So between the four, we have a pretty good balance. And I think also since we are the organizing group, the host group, it's possible that they've got issues with us, but I think that the concern of what the DA's office can take on hasn't really come up yet, since we're sort of at this point leading the charge. We've only been functioning for about 4 months. But we are excited that we are going to get somebody from the Philadelphia Police Department and their victims assistance officers unit coming next month. So that's going to be great. Yeah. And then I'm really excited to start pushing for someone from like the city mental health agency after that.
Excellent.
Yeah, step by step.
That's great.
And are you guys, are you an elder abuse unit, or are you within the DV unit, or how are you structured?
I don't know if I see Alex's face now, who's works with this.
Hi, sorry, for some reason I couldn't get on the network, even though I'm on the same network as Jillian and Serena, but I was on my phone. So we are our own unit, and we're actually under the financial crimes unit, although we do domestic violence too, because the grant is for financial crimes, and part of the purpose was doing financial work.
Yeah.
The issue we've run into, although we've worked around it, is confidentiality. So like Julian and Serena is saying, because we chair it, we've brought a lot of the cases to the unit, and in some senses it's kind of easier for us to talk about cases that exist because some of that information is public. We have a publicly filed complaint, we might have court hearings, things like that. So there's a little more flexibility when talking about it, but particularly with the Senior Law Center, because they have an attorney-client relationship, and with the Philadelphia Corporation for the Aging is our adult protective services. They have very strict confidentiality laws. So essentially what we've done is talked hypotheticals, like we have an 85-year-old victim who's, naming no names and so on and so forth.
Right.
And I think at some point that's going to fail, because, at some point there's going to be a person that we don't just need advice on, but we need to specifically track that person as they move through the criminal, civil, and social services systems. And we are still working on a confidentiality agreement, which I know is the ultimate endpoint. But I just didn't know if you all had any advice on navigating everybody's confidentiality policies, because I think that's our big next hurdle.
Definitely. I think, can we give them Lish's information?
Lish did a training for us from the Confidentiality Center, and I'm blanking on her last name, Alicia.
And I did the same thing, and I did the training with her, but I'm always like, Lish.
I know.
But I'll look it up.
But yes, we have that recorded. It's a 2-part. Alicia Aiken.
Thank you.
That was hard work. And she'll, so we could send that. Betsy's making a note of it right now, I see.
I think we recorded our last one that we did as well. Okay. And we did actually cover that in pretty good detail, I think, in terms of the the scope of confidentiality and where those lines go. So that would definitely be a good place to start. I had a question though. So once you all decide, okay, in my old jurisdiction, cases went to MDT until there were like, we were at the table until there was a decision to prosecute. And if there was a decision to file an indictment or to file charges, then that case was removed from the MDT for group consideration, because the point of our MDT was to basically do anything but prosecute, right? Like, what solutions can we come up with besides prosecution? Do you all have the same kind of concept? Like, once you decide to file charges, it comes off the table, or do you continue to speak about those cases at MDT depending on what's needed?
So as Serena was saying, we're all still pretty new. So it's all kind of being done and decided at the same time. But my concept was always to have something that stays in the MDT as long as the MDT is helpful. And particularly with a lot of the financial crimes, what I was doing before the year as an MDT, and I worked with a lot of these organizations already, and particularly with some of the financial crimes, we need that civil legal help, because people will come to us with a deed theft or ruined credit or whatever and say, I need my house back. And I'm like, well, I can get this person on probation and maybe get you some restitution and maybe even put the person in jail. But you do not want, I am prohibited from giving you any civil legal advice. And really, you do not want my civil legal advice, because I will probably sign the house over to Disney World or something. I have no idea what I'm doing. So that was a tremendous asset to me, to be able to say, hey, there's this social services organization out there, go to them and they'll help you with a quiet title action. They'll help you, file lis pendens so the house isn't sold while there's a prosecution. So there's certainly going to be cases where we don't have a prosecution. But I think so far, most of them have been referred, or either sort of on that track, and they might not go all the way, but they're on the track to criminal involvement, or they're in, actively charged cases and are moving forward.
And that's how it works in our jurisdiction too, in Seattle. And we, we'll stay on a case, and usually by the time, if it's a case where there's a civil angle, we may end up not needing to staff it with the MDT as a whole, but we keep working with the civil attorneys because it's such an important part of what's going on and what we need to have happen. And that collaboration is perfect. I mean, it's really a really important collaboration. And I think that's consistent with, they don't ever have a problem working with us because it's consistent with the goals of their client. But the other thing I wanted to mention to you guys is we got a bill passed in our legislature that basically authorizes MDTs in each county in the state. And it requires that there be confidentiality, and it also allows for information sharing between the groups. And we've never had any issues since that legislation got passed. So if you guys want me to send you that statute, I'm happy to do that, but pretty non-controversial. Nobody opposed it. And it was, once we had the connections with the legislature, we were able to get it through really easily. And that made a huge difference for us.
Paige, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay.
Not that you would be lobbying on grant time. But yes.
Lisa, is that directly
That's my federal declaration that, y'all get to keep the money. So I won't get anybody getting in trouble.
I also will say, I think Alex and Serena agree with me on this. I think one of our hopes, or what I think we're seeing coming out of it, is also to build a good relationship with law enforcement. Like, we want to have a healthy relationship. We want that to be a healthy, productive relationship. And I think, especially with the APS agency, we would like that to be more fluid. And I think that's one of our hopes, is that we can make it more fluid.
It's made a huge difference for us. Just them finding out that we're interested in these cases, which are, as you guys know, a pain to investigate and complicated. If they hear the prosecutors are interested and willing to prosecute, and they get good guidance from us about, what kind of evidence we need and what kind of cases we're interested in, they really have responded. And so that's been really wonderful. And also getting dedicated detectives appointed who do elder abuse cases has been incredibly helpful. Do you guys have any dedicated detectives?
No, we unfortunately don't have any for our unit. We do have access to them from the general pool in the financial crimes unit, but they're honestly in short supply. And if I had my way, I would have a dedicated detective, but we have not gotten that far, unfortunately. Philadelphia has a whole kind of, anyway, it's not worth it, but hiring a investigator is more complicated than it should be.
Yeah. Ours is actually through a police agency. We work with like 39 police agencies, but one of our police agencies agreed to let this person just do strictly elder abuse cases. And the other detectives in her unit were happy to give up the cases and let her do them.
Yeah.
So, might have somebody who's really passionate about it who might be willing to volunteer and make it a little easier.
Yeah, Paige, it's a good thought. And because the detectives range from incredibly sympathetic, but sort of frustrated by the cases to, actively trying to get rid of them and I do think it would be incredibly helpful to have a dedicated person, even if they either from the MDT or in the police department itself that we could liaison with. I think that's a very good goal because they are very complicated, but it is the kind of thing where if you do a few, they become a lot less complicated.
Exactly.
Sort of know where the evidence is buried and also know what can really realistically be done, because unfortunately some of them just can't be prosecuted.
Right.
And you can, save yourself a lot of time by not banging your head against the wall with it.
And resource wise for them, like they don't have to have like 5 different detectives learning this really complicated stuff. They have one person who develops a relationship with you guys and also the knowledge they need to bring the cases. And it just makes so much more sense for everybody.
So you have 39 law enforcement. We have one giant bureaucracy that we mostly liaison with. So we will have to work with them to either get somebody specific or at least somebody who's a point of contact to really kind of prevent us from having to call around the districts and call around the different detective bureaus and stuff like that.
And usually, if you have one case you guys have brought or you weren't able to bring that is really a powerful story, like we took a case like that to the elected sheriff for the King County Sheriff's Office and talked to her about it and kind of convinced her to do that. And we had a detective in mind who was really interested and they were willing to do it. So definitely something to think about.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
So we've got Kirk Martin in Oklahoma City who's sharing that in the chat that they also refer victims to the legal aid and to the bar associate for pro bono assistance by the probate guardianship attorney sections and committees. Kirk, you want to share any more about kind of how your team's doing and the work you're doing over there?
He said, we are getting dedicated detectives to attend and assist. Let's see if there's anything else.
That's great.
That is great. Piggybacking off of what Paige said, I think when the detectives realize that you are interested, that you will take the time to answer their questions and just offer a little bit of guidance, it just really does change, I think, the quality of the work and the quality of the passion that they put into it. Because I know what's been really frustrating for a lot of them has been, they might really, really care about a case and then it gets sent to the prosecutor's office and the prosecutor's like, oh, this is horrible, or we can't do anything with this, or whatever reason, and it doesn't go forward the way the detective thought it would, and it can be very disheartening. So I think having just that communication with them as well is helpful. Especially if they're at the MDT, if they have a spot at the table, just so they know, hey, I see your work. If there's a problem, this is why we're not going forward, and just kind of being open with that communication with them. Do you want me to read Kirk's comment, Lisa? He just said, helping them ends up helping me. They know I will fight for justice, not just a quick resolution of the case. Exactly. I couldn't agree more, Kirk. That's generally a really good summation of how they tend to feel. They're appreciative that we're taking their work, their hard work, and trying, even if it's not the outcome we all hoped for.
I know from several MDTs that I was involved with, as soon as the prosecutor kind of put the word out that they wanted these cases, as Paige said, the law enforcement started sending them because it was truly something that they had just felt really defeated about. They'd work on the cases and only to be told by the prosecutors it was a civil matter, or, it was a competency issue, or just refusing to deal with them at all. And so once the prosecutor put the call out for these cases, they really were surprised with the number of complex cases that law enforcement started bringing to them. And that's really, really great. So Kirk says he doesn't have audio video today, and that's why he's using the chat box. I do know that we've got a couple of other folks here who may or may not have prosecutors assigned on their team yet. But we also have a Department of Justice person, APS, a hospital person, and one that kind of functions on its own. I don't know if Krista, April, Catherine, or Stephanie want to talk about what it's like working with prosecutors in your teams, given that they're not the kind of hosting agency. And Jeremy, I don't know where you're from, so I don't know your situation.
Okay, so I don't mind talking, and it was ugly sweater day today, so I do apologize, but that's unfortunately I lost the competition because I was too cute and not ugly. So as the EMDT coordinator, I'm trying to start an EMDT. We have a financial abuse team that meets, but it does not include a prosecutor beyond my prosecutor here at the DOJ. So we have a team to combat elder abuse and financial exploitation at New Hampshire DOJ, and it consists of myself, our victim witness advocate, and our prosecutor, and we share 2 investigators with the rest of the Consumer Protection and Antitrust Bureau. So we have reached out to all the county attorneys and said, hey, we need your help because we can't do this by ourselves. We've had a good reception from them. We've had a wonderful reception from police departments. We have rural ones, and we have city ones, and we have some with dedicated officers and some with part-time, one person departments, and they're part-time. So we've had really good response from them. But as far as pulling together a team and getting something moved forward that the county will take for prosecution, it's been a little bit of a struggle. I've only been doing it for 6 weeks though, so I feel like we're going to get there. This is not a criticism, but our biggest pushback actually is coming from adult protection. That's the world I lived in for 12 years prior to coming to this position. And I'm really just trying to work on the, law enforcement doesn't understand what you do, and you guys don't understand what law enforcement does. And, but you guys need to do it together for better outcomes. In our state, APS cannot hold offenders accountable. There's no legislative authority beyond investigation. So they do some investigation. They do really great connection to resources, but getting a case and holding an offender accountable really is our focus right now, is how do we make that happen? But again, the county attorneys, we met with them this week. I was not dressed this way, so I was much more convincing, and it definitely went well. So that's what we're working on. My experience though, about the first topic that came up, about prosecutors not wanting to talk about cases during prosecution, that definitely was an issue on the sexual assault resource team I sat on before, and we're not even seeing it as an issue with our adult situation. We're not giving it as an option. It's basically, we just need you right now from the start of a case. As soon as we know that there's a referral and it could potentially be criminal, we need your input. And that's how we presented it, and they said okay. So here we go into the new year and full force, and we'll see what happens.
And Krista, the issue with APS is that it's just foreign to them to work with prosecutors and work with law enforcement, or are there other barriers?
So it's mostly, I don't think it's foreign, because actually, and this was true for myself, most of the APS workers across the state came from child protection world, where they're working with law enforcement and prosecution all the time. So I don't believe it's foreign. I think the bigger piece is, so our law says that APS needs to notify, it's not notification, it's a referral. So they have to refer cases that they think might be criminal to law enforcement. They don't have a choice. So
Right.
what has actually been happening, and this was part of my needs assessment, is that they're in centralized intake for the entire state. They send these law enforcement referrals. The worker may or may not, when they get assigned somewhere down the road, may or may not reach out to law enforcement. Law enforcement may or may not reach out to the worker. It really comes down to, they think, APS thinks, oh, well, law enforcement isn't doing anything. And law enforcement thinks, I don't, some of it's, there's just not enough information on that referral form. And they're not making the extra call to get that information. So we're actually working on that. We met with APS administration to talk about how they can better provide information so that law enforcement knows it's actually a referral and not just a notification. Because I can't tell you how many times this week I have heard, well, they never called me, and so I just assumed they were dealing with it. And there's just this piece of, they're not understanding why they're getting the form, and APS is not understanding what they need to give law enforcement to move forward. So I'm trying to work on that for the entire state, and we'll see how it goes. But I mean, I think the good part of that is our APS is state-based, not county-based. So so that makes it a little bit easier. And again, it's a system I'm very familiar with, and very familiar with many of the people involved. So the administration and whatnot. So, but yeah, it's mostly communication. And then that piece of, I don't want to share information, and I'm not quite sure where that comes from. It sounds like sometimes prosecution has that problem. I don't want to give up any information, or I don't want my information shared. Here in New Hampshire, it feels more like APS is very protective of, this is mine. But they are very good at honoring self-determination and the rights of victims. And so I think some of it stems from that.
So we had two things in the quote in the chat that Kirk says he actually meets with the elderly and white collar crime detectives, and they go over their investigations, and Kirk gives them directions around that, and that working together in the initial part of that has really helped move those forward, as well as getting the other prosecutors in the office to think about the cases. And the crimes against children has helped them comprehend why these cases are different. Serena in Philly says that we're struggling exactly with for the same thing you were, Krista, how to get the Office of Adult Protective Services to send the district attorney's office the referrals, and what those obstacles are to that taking place. Is it legal, cultural, political, or routine? One of the, I don't know if y'all wanted to go ahead and move into that, or we have a question that y'all put up. I skipped over the case study. So how does it change around the prosecutor's attendance or APS's attendance? And as Krista was saying, how do you get them to play nice together and see that it's not one of the things that some of the 2019 grantees talked about for these folks last time is that, it was surprising that some folks are intimidated by the EMDT, and that sometimes APS feels like we're telling them how to do their job or that they did their job wrong. And I think sometimes prosecutors feel like they should be the sole decider around what happens with that case. And certainly that might be true legally. But I think it would be beneficial to have that more information at their fingertips rather than less. So I was wondering if y'all could kind of speak to that back and forth that we have with APS and prosecutors, and how they can help that group and not be defensive with each other around some of that. And I think that a little applies to law enforcement as well.
Well, that's a simple fix, right?
Just, yeah,
No.
we've got about 10 more minutes. Let's see what you can
Oh
do.
dear. Paige, you want to go first?
Sure. And we've really tried to there's 2 other elder abuse prosecutors in my office and me, and we've really tried to be more accessible to APS by, like, we've done a bunch of trainings, just the 3 of us will go over there, 2 of us will go over there and just be in their office and train, do a training about elder abuse and what we need and how we can help you and what we need from you. And then we've also tried things like office hours where we go over there for just like several hours and one afternoon, and so they can just bring questions to us. We've also tried to, this is going back to what some other people were saying, I think, about the issues with APS, including us. We've asked APS actually just very recently if they would be willing to loop us in when they send their referrals to law enforcement. So they do, I think they do by email now, referrals to law enforcement instead of calling them in most cases. And so we're asking them to CC us on those referrals, which is allowed under our statute. And so, like, just, it really is, I think, a cultural thing, and it really sort of about helping them understand how we can help them. Like, if we prosecute a case, it actually helps them do their job, and their caseloads are terrible and they're overburdened, and so it's much easier for them to do their job if we actually end up filing charges. So it makes sense for them to be collaborative with us. I just think it's foreign, and so anything we can do to kind of demystify what the work is that we do and help them feel supported and like we're on the same side as them, I think can help a lot.
Agreed.
So you want to add to that?
Yeah, I spent the last 2 years working in the precincts with directly with detectives and command staff and lieutenants. And I will tell you, it was eye-opening. As long as I've been doing criminal law as a prosecutor and as a public defender before that, really I got to understand that law enforcement looks at their cases very differently than how we look at our cases. And so what I found was just being there, being accessible, doing trainings, answering questions in real time, showing them that I will return your phone call, I will return your email if you do have a question. Doing those follow-ups, building that relationship really helped to make a difference. That by the end, at the beginning, they were very skeptical. They were like, are you really going to bring anything to this? Are you really going to be helpful? And then by the end, we had a great working relationship, myself with several lieutenants, several detectives. They weren't afraid to call me even from the scene. If something like big was happening, they're like, I just don't want to screw this up. I really want to just make sure, can I double check this with you? And they knew I would answer. So I think the idea of, I took something as simple as in Georgia, the RICO statute. For whatever reason, our law enforcement thinks it is like the catch-all for everything. And an article had come out about a case being prosecuted under RICO, and everyone thought everything could now be RICO. And it had a lot of buzz. So I was like, you know what, let's do a lunch and learn on it. And so I scheduled a lunch and learn. I had 4 precincts worth of detectives come in. And I brought in a senior ADA who, like, that's his bread and butter. And we had a great just discussion back and forth, a brief training on something that interests them, but also increases the value and the quality of the work that they were bringing to our office. So I think building those kinds of relationships, and it doesn't take that much. I think I did a training once every quarter for them. And it was
the same we said for
lunch.
APS. We do the same thing with APS and do trainings and be a presence at their offices.
Yeah, just once a quarter, pop by, send an email, leave my number. you have any questions, call me. Hey, you working on anything interesting today? Do you have to run anything by me? And just kind of being there and asking those questions made a real world of difference in building those relationships and in forming that trust. I think that will help a lot.
So we're about at 5 minutes. I want to give these folks a chance to answer any last questions, but they both, Lisamarie, are you doing it this year? You in DC this year? So
I will.
Paige is one of the primary authors on the NIPEA, the National Institute for the Prevention of Elder Abuse. And that's going to be going on February, what'd you say, Lisamarie? The 12th?
The week of the 12th, I think February
In
13th through the
DC.
16th. Yeah.
And both of these folks are trainers in that, and that is only for prosecutors. So if you're interested in that, I think Anna just threw in the chat box the registration link for that. It's in a cool hotel. I've used for a couple of other things, great restaurants in walking distance, and just some really good information for you at that training. I really hope that that y'all can attend. I think Tulsa, I don't think we have anyone from Tulsa, do we? Okay. And so I wanted to make sure that we got that in there. So if anybody else, we got a couple more minutes. Any additional questions for these two?
And also feel free to reach out to us individually afterwards.
Please do.
I lost the chat. There was something else, I think. Krista, did
It was
you-
the survey.
Yes,
Okay.
just drop the evaluation link in the chat. So take a second to fill that out, and you'll see all the contact information on your screen right now. Thank you all so much for joining us.
And as always, reach out to your TA person if you've got any additional questions, or if you lose these people's email, we know where to find them. And Paige is on our advisory board as well for the center, and we're lucky to have the two of y'all. So thank you so much for taking your time to spend with us on a Friday afternoon. And thanks again, everybody, for spending time with us today.
Thanks you all very
Pleasure.
much. Appreciate it.
Thank you all and good luck with the work, and thank you for the work you're doing.